on its way. So let me share this thing that Ian shared earlier. Not that one.
So on the 4th of May, you sent it to me.
Are you seeing this survey?
Yep.
Yep.
There we go. That's the PDF. I've got a link to it. But I understand you helped him with some of the questions, George.
Yes.
There's probably because if you helped him with some of the questions, I don't know if you got involved, Paul. I didn't.
No, I didn't.
But he's asked for feedback if we're interested. Do you want me to share it?
Yeah,
stick it in the
yes.
chat.
Share with that, mate.
Okay. He said he did say in his email. Let me get that up. That's probably more interesting. He did say in his email that they've had 50 odd responses. So they're starting to get some sort of data behind it.
You've got to respond by the 20th of May, isn't it? I think from memory.
That I don't know. Let's have a look.
Yeah, 20th of May is in the email, got you.
You seeing the email?
Yep.
58 responses, so starting to get something meaningful. Chair of the Digital Construction Working Group, ISG. Share it as far as possible. So what you want me to do? Put the link in or the blank survey? Let me know, guys.
I think probably the PDF.
Yeah. Okay. Stick that on here.
And there's a link. If you click on the link,
Yeah.
it just you got the same link. It just takes survey outcome, isn't it? .eu. Just takes people straight there.
Okay, so I will stick that on the chat when I get 5 minutes. Did you follow up on that? Don't go on.
That's the link I've got. I've put it on the chat so you can see the one I've got. I think it's the same one.
Oh well.
I think it is the same one. If you click, just make sure it's the same. I think it is. If you click on it, I think it's the same one, Martin.
Alchema EU. For certainly, there can't be two of those, can there?
No, there can't be. I think it's the same one.
Yeah.
I'll send it through internally to can someone fill it in. It's all about percentages of who's doing what. That's all.
Yeah. Okay.
I guess I'll only get it wrong.
Interesting. So that's come out in since we last spoke. I shared that thing from CoBuilder with you, George. Is that of any interest, use, insightful?
Yeah. I'm aware of it. I mean,
Okay.
CoBuilder, as you might know, they're basically another sort of player that is trying to. But there's a charge service. So
not free. That is
no.
for sure.
Yeah. So, which I think's. I mean, they're competing with MBS and BIM Object and all of these other people as well. So, if they make it free, that would be fine. But I mean, what they're trying to do at the moment is get the templates together, and quite frankly, that's what we've spent bloody years doing with CPA.
Yeah.
Have
you seen their web page? Quite interesting. In as much as I think slowly but surely we're all coming to the same sort of realization that if we've got a back end library of sorts,
yes,
and then we digitize our information exchange, dirty great long list of what we want from everybody as and when, using 19650, agree the dates, we should have a workable model that becomes a solution.
yes, and if everybody's using
in a nice way, that says what we've been saying for the last 12 months, really, doesn't it? In terms of a graphic. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and it's what we've been doing for the last probably 7 or 8 years.
Yep.
And I guess, I mean, what we've been trying to do is make sure that it's not in a proprietary format. And the difficulty is, to some extent, you mentioned 19650.
Yep.
Martin. 19650 doesn't do anything about defining data standards. It's really processes.
Yeah. No, you're right.
And it's the data libraries itself that is the big challenge as to how we get those defined.
Yeah. 19650 allows you to have a framework, though, doesn't it? To say,
Yeah, no.
This is what we're going to do, and this is our
Yes.
information exchange requirements at all of these stages
Yeah.
from you. And if you can get the designers and the CDP packages to sign up to that, you've got something to manage then in terms of information flow.
Definitely. Oh no, I agree with it. But the underlying data needs to be in a neutral standard format, in my view, not a proprietary format. And so that's why we created the templater as a basis for doing that. And we've now got that. That's quite a mature technology that can then
Surely
be used.
They must know about that, George. In fairness, they must know that, like you know them. They must know of you guys and what you're doing. They must know it's going to fall over if they're going to charge for it when there's a free service elsewhere being built.
Yeah, they've done everything they can to undermine the free service because they don't want it to be free. Where this originally started, Martin, is that the CPA came out with a standard came out with a desire to create a standard free service for manufacturers, and BRE and CoBuilder were competing for that particular contract, and BRE won it using the templater, and CoBuilder then said, can we partner with you? So BRE, we agreed that we should partner with them. So we provided them, we went into a collaboration with them whereby we provided them with the templater as a means to hold their information, because what they got is data that they've been compiling on behalf of manufacturers. But when they then realized that it was also going to be available to other people like MBS and BIM Object, they started to, well, first of all, it became clear that they didn't have a lot of the data that they said they had. And secondly, they decided that they were going to produce a competitive product. That emerged over probably 2 years or something like that. And in the meantime, they just spent quite a lot of time with CPA agitating and sort of preventing a free service because they didn't want it to be free. And that has undermined the whole lexicon initiative, to be honest, which is very frustrating.
But what does the future hold then? Is it still full steam ahead then, as far as what you're talking about in the lexicon project's future? Hello, Petra.
Hello everyone. Apologize for my delay. It's a first day after my holiday, so it's hundreds of emails and phone calls from the morning. Apologize.
It's okay. Just learn the lesson. Don't take holidays.
How you doing again,
yeah.
you all right, mate?
Yeah, not bad, not bad.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
what does the future look like there, George? Do you think? How do you see it panning out?
I think the CPA have just made it too complicated. So and also a lot of the product manufacturers are reluctant to engage with standardization anyway. So it's I think it's a challenge. I don't know the answer, to be honest with you, Martin.
Mm.
Can I just jump in as well? I mean,
Yeah.
Did you see the CIV Reba guide that came out recently?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So safety critical elements.
Yeah, and just really interesting. It's like,
Yeah.
what have all the guides got in common? All of them, right? And this is not a criticism. No, I'm going to be outrageous again, as I usually am. None of them actually tell you how to do it.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's, I mean, apart from the FIS guide on how you do best practices of penetration seals, which is a part 3 guide only, and that is like that thick, and it gets you to a point where you can possibly select some penetration seals in a building, or gives you a bit of an education around it.
Yeah.
But actually, none of them actually tell you how to do them as individual components and how to put them together as a system. You know, and that's why I think all of these different things that are coming out aren't really solving the issue. It's telling you how to look at the dance floor, not actually
Yes.
dance around on it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Courtesy of Paul Connolly, those words, mate. His famous saying. But
Okay.
you know, no one's on the dance floor, are they? Everyone's sitting above it watching it, and that's half the problem. No, actually understands actually how you jig it all together.
I think you're right. I'm seeing more and more stuff coming through, thinking it's just adding to the layers of complexity here. It's more to take on board. No one's actually sort of, like you say, produced a sort of solution. I think we're heading towards it, though.
Yeah.
I think most people are clear in their heads now in terms of if you can get your list of deliverables sorted before you start digging holes, and captured, and it's streamlined in terms of 19650 or information exchange, then if you do have to wait that bit longer for the design to be resolved, then you're going to have to wait that bit longer for the design to be resolved. Not 6 years, as we were alluding to earlier, but maybe instead of 2, maybe 2.5, to get it right. Then fine, so be it. It's just going to mean more upfront costs for developers and central government and local government. And I don't know whether they thought that through when they introduced all the legislation that's basically forcing us all down this road of we can't start until the design is done.
But do you know, it's interesting, right? Because you know, you look at it and you go, look, everyone's arguing around cost, right? And you see it all the time, don't you? I've got it 100%. People are arguing around different manufacturers for, again, dampers and ducts and stuff like that. When you go, let's just take it back a step and say, what is the risk? And this is your words, George, as well, by the way. What is the risk of the space you're trying to address? And they'll go, don't know. And you go, so how do you know what you're putting in it? They go, just looking for the best price. And I think there is a bit of traction to get there, but at the moment, I think people are getting there.
I think so.
Too late, right? Still getting it's about trying to get it to come forward a little bit. And my gut feel is, and I don't want to be too outrageous, but it will take a good few years before the boom mill picks that up and fixes it, right? Not because
before the what, Paul? I missed that bit.
The boom mill picks it up and fixes it, right?
Do you think so? Okay.
I do, and the reasons why I think it is because when you look at, like, I mean, those sheets I put together for George a long while ago, and you go, right, like, you know, fire rated duct, there's something like 47 bits of asset information you need to record for it in the model. Some of those are geometry, right? Some of those have to be PDF held as well, but there's 47 bits you need to put in, and that doesn't include the next sort of possible 60 or 70 odd that you need, depending on where you're putting it. So I think it's going to take a while to get that.
Paul's absolutely right on that. And one of the carry on, Martin.
No. I'm seeing it. I'm seeing that in terms of the bin wheel catching up. I get that, but I think in terms of the designers world, which is where I was, I think, and the developers world, I think most people are beginning to realise that instead of comparing apples with apples, which is what we tend to do, people are stepping back from it and saying, well, you know, what size orchard do we need? They're just coming away.
They're
coming away.
Questions, Martin, aren't they? But they're not. they're still not pinning the towel on the donkey in the right spot, as how I'm seeing it. You know, they're getting closer, but they're still like that far away.
Depends on the customer. It really does depend on the customer.
No, I agree. Totally agree with that. Totally agree.
Yeah.
Depends on the knowledge and of that particular customer you're dealing with.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a behaviour thing, though, Martin, isn't it? If everyone, you know, if everyone had the habitualness to listen to other people's views, sound like I'm contradicting myself here without interrupting, though that's what I just did.
Yeah.
You know, you probably get there a lot quicker. But it's that bit, isn't it? You know, I'm not paying for that. Find something cheaper. Well, this thing does the function that you need. Change the risk of your space, but I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
You can't have it both ways, can you?
Yeah.
It's when you get to that dynamic argument of actually, there's the safety case, there's the thread that goes with that safety case for that wall with all that stuff in it.
Yeah.
You want to change anything, you can do it, well, you don't change that number. What do you want to do? And then the conversation's dead. And that's how it's kind of getting to that point, isn't it, Martin? You know, we're almost there, but it's not actually anywhere near it, you know, probably as well. We're quite far away, depending on the customer.
In the last month, we've had two interesting developments. We've turned a customer down because he wasn't ready.
Yep.
And he was shocked to his boots. Absolutely shocked to his boots. Not a big job. But we said, the more we said you're not ready, you need to go away and get your designers further on. The more you really do need to do a lot more work on the design before you can engage meaningfully with us. We're not prepared to start until you get more done. Good customer, framework customer. Shocked, absolutely shocked. And talking to the architect, our team were talking to the architect and the structural engineer. And it was like they were in a different world.
Yeah,
they were in a different world. They were. What's all this?
It.
Why do you need all this information? What? The law now,
you know,
guys.
a really good point the other day, Martin. You're like this one, right? A really good point the other day that was raised, and I'm not going to say you raised it, but they said we just need help because we've got one contractor who's saying we need 500-600 mil of space in the riser to do the seals and do all the connections. Another one saying they can just do it tight and flush.
Yeah.
And I said, well, the one that's saying they can do it tight and flush is obviously going to be at fault here because they're going to learn their lesson at the installation phase that you can't do it, right?
Yeah.
And that's difficulty that some architects are having, and I can fully appreciate conflicting information. I was going to say, Martin, do you speak to Richard Ashton a lot in your business?
Yeah, afraid so, yeah.
Yeah, no. Listen, I mean, because I'm running the process side of it, and I sort of said before the last couple of groups is that I'm getting to the stage where I need to kind of bring this, you know, bring this and that into a bit of a meat, because you know we're getting to the point where if you look at it, and I don't mean this rudely, that a lot of tier 1 contractors still think that the problem lied with the builder's work, and it's not. It's getting this, you know, we're getting there, you know, we're there ourselves. It's about getting the right product for the right risk and associated system as a wall put together before you get to the point of trying to even coordinate it.
Yeah.
You know, so I think this whole thing on the BIM side of it, and I wasn't being rude earlier, Georgia, and I know you said you're with me with it, is that I think it's going to take a lot longer to get that to an order where the template is and things are all linked, because you've got to get it to the point where the manufacturer's on board, the client's on board, the architect's on board, and that common language is being used. You know, I think that's going to be a while off before we kind of get there with that.
Okay, so just to go back on what Martin was asking earlier, where are we going with all of this, with lexicon and the like?
Yeah.
The biggest challenge that I've found is to actually try and get from people what attribute information is needed to be added to a product to be able to be used. So that's the whole point about having the templates. One of the things that has become very clear, and it's taken me years to get here, Martin, is that depending on how that product is going to be used, the information is going to be different. And it comes back to what Paul was saying earlier. The context in which the product is going to be used is the determinant in terms of what attributes you should be asking for. So there's some attribute information, in fact, a lot of it, probably more than 80%, is fixed. And therefore, it's common to every time that pump is going to be used. 20% of it is variable, and some of that comes from the context in which it's being used, and the other is just finally its serial number and things like that. So what we need to be doing is looking at that in that sort of growth, in that sort of evolving detail. Now, the approach that we took with the template, the reason I still think the template is the right solution to this is because what you've got is it's a data dictionary which allows you to put in there all of the variable attributes with their description in a common way, with synonyms that allow you to then describe things in different ways, but they're all referencing back to the same attribute. And you can then put the unit of measure in there as well, because what most people don't, as Paul was saying earlier, the problem is everybody's working at too high a level of detail here. What most people don't appreciate is IFC, for example, which is the international standard for data. As far as the attributes are concerned, it doesn't include unit of measure. Now, therefore, and that's because in the UK we'll use millimeters. In different European countries they'll use centimeters, or they'll use an imperial in America. So therefore,
they use inches.
Yeah. So therefore, what you need to do is to be able to have that as a variable that can then be commonly accessible. Sorry if that's going into too much detail, but it's fundamentally part of what we're trying to do with these data templates, which then can be applied once you know where it's going to be used. Yeah. So the product library, the solution that we built, and okay, you might say that what we've done is proprietary, but we've done it in such a way that it's open and free and it uses all the standards. It allows you to be selective in terms of what you need. So you're actually picking something for that particular context, and that's why that's why I've been following this route of making the product library free, because the minute you'll notice in that collaboration, you know, the one that you sent me through, Martin, the email that you sent, you won't see any of the other product manufacturers' library solutions, MBS core, any of those actually on there, because CoBuilder is competing with them. Yeah. Now that's understandable from CoBuilder's point of view, but it means that we don't have a when you, for example, as Balfour Beatty, you want to get your data, you've got it's just another silo. That's why I think we need to have something that's at a fundamental level that's free. Now, how we fund it, Martin, I genuinely don't know. I mean, I've given my IP away effectively in terms of that process, and we're getting quite a lot of traction from some players on that, including people like Lloyd's Register. And if we can then tie that back to maybe cost data and also environmental information as well, carbon, because we've now put carbon in there. I think so. If we've got carbon and fire, those are two key elements. So that's the approach that I think we should be taking.
This is going to sound weird, George, but like Paul was saying earlier, there's going to be a while before the BIM world catches up, as it were. I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think it's needed before we can go down the route of doing it properly, like we were laying out in terms of getting the design right before you start. I don't think that's a blocker.
I agree.
I think it's an improvement at the end of the process, and it will continually improve. I don't think it's you have to sort this out before you can do it properly. Does that make sense? You've got
I
two
agree.
hands up now, Paul.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's fine. I was going to say, look, what was interesting, right? And because every day's a school day, right, for all of
Yeah.
us, right? And I always suspected that pipe work was the hardest one to select, and everyone used to go to me, "You're wrong. I just something about it wasn't right." And I tell you what, it's the bloody hardest one to select, right? It's probably not as hard as fire doors, but it's difficult because what we always forget. You know, it's a bit like in dampers, you have to make sure you understand the blade type that you want because it screws all your part L calculations up if you get it wrong. That makes sense. If it's E and it should be ES, you've killed your scheme because suddenly you lost 50% of your free air and your fans are all knackered and your ducts are all too small. In pipe work, the material's got to be appropriate for the function for which it was designed originally, which is the fluid it's carrying, right? So what happens is, and this will make you laugh, right, is that you know, you've got to look at the insulation requirements for thermal. You've got to look at it in relation to what jointing system you're using, all the rest of it, before we even start talking about the combustibility of the material, because that's affected by the period of time and resistance that you need, whether it's 2 or 4 hours. Some materials flip into combustible after 2 hours, like copper does, right? And that's the bit that actually, when you look at how everyone goes to like the likes of Quellfire or, you know, they'll go to Hilti or Rockwall, they'll go, here's a load of pipes. That's non-combustible. Can you give me a seal for it? And they'll have a go, but they won't get it right because we've actually got to tell people in the non-combustible world the thickness of the bore of the pipe, its reaction to fire, to make sure the seal that's being used is comparable with the bore thickness of the polyethylene or the HDPE or the, you know, the UPVC, whatever they're using. The reaction to fire was the same as the one that was tested. Does that make sense?
Yes.
There's none of that is happening before we get on to the next bit. We're still going out to the market at the last minute and going, can you give me a seal? Yeah. And it's just to put it into that. What I'm trying to, you know, you've seen some of it, Jules. What I'm trying to do is get, first thing is to get a proper, and I don't mean this disrespectful to any trade organisation or anything, to get a proper code of practice that everyone can dance around, right? So everyone knows how to behave. Like Code M doesn't tell you how to commission a building from SIBSI, it tells you how to behave around it, right? You've got Guide A does air systems, W does water, that tells you how to identify those systems in your building, and BISRA tells you how to do it. And the same principle applies to this, you know. So when you look at it, you sort of go, well, once you know the appropriateness of the material for what you're using, then you can look at the pipework seals that you want to put in, because there's continuously sustained like insulation through outlets. You know, it could be, you know, plastic changing to metal, which is uncapped to capped, you know. So all this stuff's got to be considered first before you go out. And at the moment, we're just not doing it. Do you know what I mean? Previously, and it's all in the FIS guide about, you know, part 3 penetration seals, but actually it's so big, I think no one's really bothered to digest it. That makes sense. You kind of, you're laughing there, but it's true. You've got to kind of get it into pictorial form for an architect and a building services engineer before it even comes down to the likes of us, Martin, because otherwise they're just going to keep going around in a bloody circle, aren't they? They're never going to get it right.
Like I was telling you about that customer with his design team, their reaction, it surprised us, but at the same time didn't surprise us. But they were nonplussed by our approach. At the same time, we've been approached by another customer who you wouldn't dream of us doing a development for. You just wouldn't go there because they're normally associated with best way to put this, more dynamic, possibly. Construction companies.
Just say the word lax. It's easier. Lax, yeah.
Less risk averse, possibly. And and it's a market that we pulled out of deliberately 5 or 6 years ago, which is, you know, massive resi schemes in multiple stories and in city centres. But they've approached us because they've heard that we're trying to do this one step at a time. And they've said, we want you to talk us through the process, step by step, so that we can manage our designers. We understand about being responsible and accountable for the designers, and we need your input into, and we're talking to them. And you honestly would not associate us with this developer. Cutting edge. I think you know what I'm saying, but it's just
Yeah,
weird.
I totally get it. As you said earlier yourself, Martin, that it all depends on the customer, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
On their motivator. Because everything we say is not to be geography, is it? It's just like you get some clients that want to, and this is, I think, one of the biggest risks at the moment I see is probably again in the student models. We had this before, back in the late 2000s, where people carved them up and chopped them, flipped them off to someone else and disappeared. And they're one of the big ones because, you know, it's got everything. It's got sleeping risk, got everything you want. They all want passive house, they want the whole works that go with it. But actually, when you start getting into equipment that you need to satisfy those risks and actually perform under lower air leakage rates, it starts to get a bit expensive to do it properly. Then the pushback is you've got to, you know, again, the famous word kicks in, value engineer it.
Yeah. They want the words, Paul. But they don't understand what it is they want. So they want it to be carbon neutral, and when you try and explain that to them, then they don't really want it, and they want it to be, as you say, insulation, sort of mega performing. And then when you explain that to them, they don't really want it. They don't really want passive house. They just want the word. And then it's the same pain when you go through. Okay, you're going to have to comply with the law now, chaps, in terms of you're above 18 meters and people are going to sleep in your building. We want all that. This is what it means. You're going to have to spend the money up front.
You know, someone said
Not
something
so
the other
keen
day,
now.
Just to make you laugh, Martin. Someone said something the other day, and I can't remember who it was, but they said, I can't remember who said it. It said, it's a bit like, this isn't like going to France, you know, paying for the course to speak it, but only getting the accent. Do you know what I mean? And you've actually got to learn the language as well. And I was like, yeah, that's actually spot on. I like that. It's so true.
You've got
No
to do
good
the
coming
hard
back
yards.
with a language, you know, with the accent, but you can't speak the language. It's just no good.
Yeah. Anyway,
Yes.
I think customers generally, compared to 12 months ago, are beginning to dawn on them. They're getting better advice that this is coming. They can't do anything about it. It's now in place, and there are a lot of contractors out there who will do whatever they say, like the good old days. But there are a growing number who say, "No, hang on, are you ready for this?" Because if you're not, we're not going to go dancing with you. To use Paul's analogy.
I mean, what
designers? By heck, does that vary? By God, does that vary? Some of them are getting it, and some of them are still carrying on. Blinkers.
What one of the challenges that I've got, Martin, is that we've had the solution to a lot of this stuff for quite a few years, and the problem that I've got, first of all, we're a small company, and therefore the marketing isn't. We've not been able to market it, but the technology is very sound, and also we've been through the process and we've tested it on live jobs. So a lot of what we're doing is not theoretical. Second thing is that in BIM for housing, I've obviously been fairly careful about being overtly promoting my solution, because what I've been trying to do is to be neutral and encourage other people to engage. And I think I've been pretty honourable about that. Otherwise, people wouldn't be continuing to participate in what we're doing. But the difficulty is, at what stage do I actually step out there and say, look, we've actually got something that resolves this? And I feel we've got some on a call this morning. We've been appointed on 6 PPP college projects really it's across Ireland, and the methodology that we're using there follows on from what we've been doing with Sodexo on a PFI scheme there, and also with a company called Rattigan's construction company that's delivered 9 schools on D&B. And they've followed the process of using the product library and the templater to actually compile the information that then glues together what they're doing in the BIM process and also then generates the O&Ms. So we've got that soup to nuts approach. Now, what we've been doing is, and this has actually also evolved from the work that we've been doing with Bouygues, is we're looking at the technical submittal or RDD stage as being the final stage at which you pick the product. Now, you and I have spoken about this, Martin. Clearly, it's a lot better if it can be done much earlier than that. But
yeah, it's too late. It's too late if you're doing it when you're trying to build.
No. I entirely agree. But at whatever stage, the determination of what you're actually going to use, whether that's in it can be as early as you sensibly like. That's something that can be done at that stage, and having standardized product data is a fundamental part of that process, especially if it's in a library that then the manufacturers are willing to keep up to date. Now, I've spoken with probably about 40 or 50 manufacturers now of fire-related products, and they're all willing to provide their information in the library environment. And I'd quite like to I think the only way of doing this would be to maybe have a one-to-one. I say one-to-one with each with Balfour Beatty, because everybody's got a slightly different process, and do the same with Mace, and cause we've also got Travis Perkins on board with the idea of them doing their side of things. Petter, where are you from?
Originally from Bulgaria.
Ah, right, okay. And are you with a construction company or a design company?
Construction, Balfour Beatty.
Oh, right, okay.
Part of Martin team.
Okay.
Or he's as a title. Yeah, we are from Balfour Beatty.
Okay. Yeah, so I don't know quite how to sort of move the thing forward. It's very frustrating, Martin, but I don't know if that's something that we could actually actually run a session just to test out.
I get there'll be an interface period and an overlap period, so there'll be times when we need that information when we're doing the install. But I do think if we set off down that road, it's the wrong road to set off. We should be getting that information before we start doing install. That should be in place, and the install should be a quality control procedure, not a quality assurance procedure.
No, I agree. What makes you think I'm not saying that?
That's
because I use the term RDD.
Yeah, or technical submittals. I think that is just way too late.
Yeah. So what stage? So could you just talk me through? So in terms of the product selection, that would be done. What would the process be called that you would use to do that?
Reba stages 2 and 3.
Yeah, I understand what stage it is, but is there a process? I mean, basically what you're saying is that you've got a designed product, which is a descriptive specification.
You're looking for solutions. Yeah, you've got a design, and you're looking for solutions, and you want to go out and specify. So it's back to the old Ian McKelvey difference between a performance specification and a general specification. Specific one.
Yeah, and if you look at it from Balfour Beatty's point of view, product selection process, which is who does that, and what's it called?
Design development.
Okay.
Yeah. Overall design development is done by the CDP package partner and the professional designer. Most of what you talked about there would have been the M&E engineer and the M&E contractor. But they both need to be engaged and paid, somebody paying for that service.
And the point at which they're doing that product selection
before you start on site.
No, I absolutely fully understand that. I'm just trying to get the terminology right in terms of
design development covers it, I think.
Yeah.
It's a hard one, right? Because when you look at definitions, right? There's not a standard definition in JCT for design development. It's normally, if you're going to put something in a contract, it's appended in.
Yeah, I'm just trying to remember what BG6 calls it, Paul.
Let's find out. I can bring it up, mate. Hold on. This is a really hard question to answer, by the way.
I think it's important that I think George is right to raise it. What is that? How do we nutshell that particular phase?
I'm gonna bring it up, mate.
I mean, how is it different? Could I just ask? My understanding of technical submittal, rightly or wrongly, is that you've got a performance specification. Yeah. And you're then selecting a product that the technical submittal process is then getting an approval that the product that's being selected is matching the performance specification. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. So
that's what we do at the moment, generally speaking. Yeah.
So you've got a performance specification. Is that if that tech sub process is actually brought forward to pre-construction? Yeah. Then it's still a tech sub process, isn't it?
It's a process. Yeah. It still needs to be done, but I would call it design development.
Right. Okay.
I just think it's a real hard one to answer, right? Because there is, if you look at it from a contractual point of view, design development only exists if it's specified in contracts, right? When you look at it in reality, and I think, and you shoot me down, Martin, as you please with this one, I think the reality is that if you get a performance specification and someone goes and does a technical submission against performance specification, I'm just going to use a classic one of a fire damper, and they go away and they find something and they give it to the building services guy to give an A to. You don't know actually whether what they've selected is correct, because the magic numbers of how you select it against the space risk just won't exist in the conversation. And just by like a building services consultant, depending on obviously the form of contract, saying A status, it doesn't mean it's actually appropriate to where you're putting it, and it's actually not worth the paper it's written on. And that's the current downside of the way that the industry behaves, George. If that makes sense. You can't guarantee. It's sort of that procurement thing for Mose, isn't it? Poor tender specifications where they go fire damper CDP. Do you know what I mean? And you look at it and you go, well, what is it? What's it protecting against? No one's asking the question. It gets thrown down to a supplier who goes, is this all right? And they go, yeah, that's fine. You put that in. I don't care.
Got the word damper there. Yeah.
Yeah. I just think it's the same thing's happening with pipework. We're in a different context because the original, consultants not really specified the pipework anyway and go contractor's choice. The contractor goes away and because a pipework is cheap as chips later on, as best they can get their hands on, then it goes over to someone that buys the passive fire seal for it and doesn't even know the material that's been selected for, just knows it's non-combustible, and that's where that disaster all kicks in. Doesn't know the size, the bore thickness of it. So that's the kind of issue, George. Do you agree with that, Martin? Sorry.
I think it's tricky for George because
Yeah.
he's thinking even when we do the tech subs, it's done 100% perfectly, and it often isn't, George.
Oh no, I'm sure.
There's there is stuff left to chance at times. Everybody's approved it, but it's still not right. Dare I say? For me,
I'm sure
the whole
that's right.
premise of the Building Safety Act is you're not doing that when you're trying to put up a building and finding that the bloody thing doesn't fit.
Yeah.
What you're doing is you're doing that before you start building.
Yeah, so the way I'm looking at it, into whatever we call it, and I think we are going to need to find a term,
Yeah.
maybe stage 1 tech sub or whatever,
I don't see it as a submission and an approval. I see it as an iterative design process.
But at some stage, you've got to have a selection, haven't you?
Out of that process should come a bang. We're having one of those. Go away.
Yeah.
Price that up by all means. Yeah, but that informs the project.
Yeah.
And
so it's a product.
There's no veering away from it. That's what's going in. That.
Yeah. Or unless there's a real need to change because that product is no longer available.
Or yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
I think just to jump on the back of it, I think the hard bit is, and Ian McElway's working on this with Joe Cilia, right? Is the whole walls as a system approach, if that makes sense.
Because, oh no, absolutely.
You can, and this is, and also I've got some stuff to share. That's why I was mentioning Richard Ashton earlier, George, because I need to share some stuff with you. But when you look at like the 5 QA points that exist, the space risk, building type of the the buildings, the first one, how it operates, obviously pipework static, so it's simple. Smoke control, you're doing something with it like sprinklers, and fire doors are transit because you're going through them. Do you know what I mean? They've got different functionality, operational functionality. Then you can look at how you classify it against those two things, how it functions and how it sits within the space risk. Then you can look at the type of wall that it works individually in. Then you can look at actually is the geometrics there so you can put it in a wall. Then you've got to look at all the other products in that wall and do the same exercise to get to the right type of firewall to house the component. And that's the bit that when you look at tender specifications and people go they're uncoordinated and the rest of it, it's because no one's done that exercise to get to that point of performance specification, which really I think should be the classification number and the appropriate wall it goes in. You can go select a product against that number. Does that make sense? And that's the bit where it's all fallen to Kahoot.
I mean, my attempt with this is to try and put some sort of standardized structure behind it so that at least, at some stage, we want to deploy AI in terms of doing this. But before we get to that, we've got to get human intelligence to be systematized so that we've got the rules and the relationships like in the decision tree that Paul's been putting together.
Well, yeah, I mean, just to add to that, Joe, I was going to share the screen quickly. Give me 1 second, mate. Just to add to it, because obviously I've done the fire damper one's been done. It's been presented, right? And this is what this is the bit where I need to get you involved. It's all about how this works as a system, right? Because that's the complex version. That's the simplified version.
Yeah.
That's your 5 QA quality assurance to get to your magic number and all your installation fit. We presented some of this at Birmingham the other one. I think you were there, Peter, actually. You was in the audience, I think, from memory. But then it's how you do, like, for dampers, it's all around getting this bit right as well, the blade types for pressure loss. Then how you select your frame types against the wall. And the same sort of thing for installation. This is the kind of thing that you need, George, for that machine learning, because this actually filters it all out, if that makes sense.
I agree.
Programmatic. But pipe work is the absolute git, because you've got to consider all of this as it's different. It's just not the same thing. So I'm trying to get them done for all the different things to get it into it. And this isn't completely right either. I need to change this around a bit. But it's got to be such a way that you get back to that magic thing of actually what you're looking for. Do you know what I mean? So the workbooks are all interreadable, what you want to get, because I've got to put a note on here about where the joints are as well, because you've got joints within 500 of the wall and they're not welded off, flanged, they're crimped. It affects how you do all of this. Joints, it's really not easy to get it right. And even when it comes down to, where's it gone? Pipe work. If you're going to go to a pipe work penetration seal manufacturer, this is what you've got to give them in scheduling form for them to give you a seal. It's all the same stuff, but it's now an Excel as well. Because my kind of brain says, George, I mean, that's what I was saying earlier, is that I think you'll end up, before you get the bin weld spot on, with things recorded digitally like this before you get there. So you know what it was, then you know what you've selected against it. Do you know what I mean? Before you get to that bin weld, because I think I think I've still got it there, trying to get, like, this is ductwork, but trying to get all of this, into the bin weld straight away, it's going to take the pre-effort to get people to embrace doing that part, if that makes sense.
Yeah, to some extent, that's why the templator is so important on this. I know I keep coming back to it.
No, I'm with you. I'm totally with you.
Because it filters just what you need to see for a particular purpose.
Yeah.
This
might sound weird. Bear with me, guys. This might sound weird, but it's just dawned on me while Paul was going there. What we're trying to do here, I think, is, because I mean, the solution to all those things that Paul threw up there, that comes from the people doing the design, the designer.
Yes.
Who's got the knowledge, the skills, the experience, and the expertise in order to do that and to know what the solution is. What we're trying to do here is unpick all of those things that he's learned over his and been taught and experienced. We're trying to unpick that and put it into a series of components, not components, of products, simple bits, that make up this thing that he's designing, with all that information that Paul was saying affects it. He's using his skill and expertise to come up with a solution, whereas what we're trying to do here is find a way and means of picking out each and every part of that solution and getting something that will pull it all out of a database somewhere and put it together and say, there's the solution. It's bloody hard, that is, George.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's you're years ahead of us there, aren't you?
I think the hard bit, and this is why, I mean, when you look at this tier 1 group, obviously Balfour's a part of it, is getting that group fully aligned, which I'm getting there with it. I am, and I don't mean it to be joggers for anyone, because we're all learning with this, right? But actually, we sort of go, the worst thing you can do is sit there and think part 3, part 2, part 1, 5, and the rest of it have got any relationship to each other, because they just haven't. And you've got to remember that the ventilation system, before the fire damper is inserted, is there to perform a function which is related to part L and delivery of air volume. That bit's got to be right first. And what happens is, if you set the wrong component, you screw that part up as a consequence of it. In pipework terms, if you get the wrong type of pipework and you start doing wrong types of jointing, and you're going from different materials, you're creating a penetration seal nightmare, which the people that select the seals, like Hilti Rockwell, can't do, because they're not in their level of expertise to do it. Wow. So you kind of got like workbook it out where people get to go through what they're doing at the principal stage, because let's be frank, architects, MEP consultants, fire engineers, they don't really understand the product classification. They do not get it. And you can't throw them under the bus for it. You've got to have a method and mechanism to support them to get closer to the mark. It's the only way I think you can do it, and that's what I've kind of said externally quite loudly. It's the only way you can do it is by doing that. When it comes down, I think, to getting this bin bit right, I think by doing that and having those, it will make the AI easier to program later on. I think it all just fits neatly into that.
Yes. Can I just clarify that, Martin? I don't think that I think we're several years off being able to do this using AI. Right.
But it's a bloody good journey, isn't it? I mean, I like the idea.
Yeah, and so therefore,
Sorry,
What
George, just while the brain's going, is there a comparable industry where they're doing this, do you think? Outside of construction? Where they're further down the journey?
Don't know.
Well,
Yeah.
I could possibly answer this.
Go on, mate.
Right. Sorry. I mean, I had some conversations with the MTC, strictly off the record of them, about bits and bobs about how they do aviation and they do turbines and things like that, because they can't test everything, right? The same way we can't test everything, can we? It's just physically impossible. They're a bit more.
Yeah, they go for a model, don't they? Or they go for a prototype.
They've got modelling, which does the majority of the work. So the AI is kind of there already embedded. But what they've managed to do, George, and I mean, it'd be worth you speaking to the MTC. I think it's Benjamin's a good guy to get in touch with. Because what they've ended up doing is that they've got certain things that they test. They use that data about the materials and what they're doing and the processes to then model it. So they limit the amount of testing they have to do. Because you can imagine, can't you, putting one of the biggest planes in the world and smashing it into the ground isn't a good idea. And you can see what, you look at the Musk example, what he's doing at the moment. He's not sending them up to succeed. He's sending them up to spot the failures. That goes back into his model. Then they move on. So for every crash, there's probably like 1,000 iterations of model that are going on with the AI before it gets to that point. Does that make sense? So that they treat it completely differently.
Yeah, I think what they also do is that they learn from what they've done and then try not to do it again. Whereas in construction, we don't. We don't learn from what we've done.
I'm
No.
laughing. I'm laughing.
You're right. Each project is a new rocket, basically. We
Yeah.
start again from scratch.
Yeah, the funny thing is, sorry, Joe, it's just the laughter of it is that if you get a really tragic plane crash like the Air France one that went off down the Atlantic at that time, really, really sad, they couldn't work it out. It's a bit like saying, well, obviously the steering wheel's at fault. Do you know what I mean? That's what we were doing because the steering wheel's at fault because it's crashed into the ground. But it's not, is it? It's all the other bits that go behind it and the causation that lead to that error, if that makes sense. They're a bit more, there's a clinical comparison of previous work to look at the work that's coming up to compare what they've got. Then I think what they probably do is take out what's left and go and look at that. If that makes sense. Completely different, way more advanced than construction, I'd say. Sorry, George, Gunn, you were going to say?
No, I absolutely. That's why I come back to the need for us to have standardized libraries of things that therefore become repeatable. And by doing that, we've got things that you can QA. You can QA them at a template level, at a product level, at a system level, at a building type level. So you're able then to have that as all fully QA'd solutions.
Yeah.
And I think that's, and by doing that, it means that the information becomes interoperable. If you don't do that and you basically do it fresh each time with people, for example, just putting attributes into BIM models, then you'll never get to where we need to get to. And you'll also always have to be checking things manually. Whereas what we can already do is we can automate the checking and the validation process.
But can we do that with the design process? That's where my head is at the moment. Can you design from
Yes,
a list of products?
Oh yeah.
Well, I think.
No, not sorry. Can I just stop there? Yeah. You're not designing from a list of products. You're designing from a list of generic items that have got attributes that satisfy the generic requirements. So by doing that, it means that you go through 3 steps. You define your information requirements in a machine readable format. You then turn that into, so those are requirements that often they're performance requirements. You've then got a product which is probably a generic product that is your design solution to that particular requirement. So you've therefore got something that is clearly auditable, and you can do comparisons between what was required and what's been what the design solution is.
Yeah.
And then you compare the designed solution with an actual product. So those are the 3 steps I would say. Does that make sense?
I think so.
No,
So
it's the same thing, George. It's a case of if the product manufacturers display the information with all the essential characteristics, like the 40 odd for smoke control ducts, right, or fire rated ducts, the one I was talking about earlier, then you can use that as a generics for putting it in, right? But then you can compare that against the product you selected because it should be in the same language.
correct.
I
And
think yeah. So
that's where the templators come in, because then you've got the language in a machine readable comparison. But we don't. The point is, the reason I've backed off doing that is because that's the area that seems to be the sticking point. And what I'm saying is that the generic requirements for the generic product, we can have that in a machine readable format. So you can test the requirement against the product, the prescribed product, as it were, which isn't necessarily a manufactured product, but it's a solution to that you can then do all your checks against. And then as long as you've got a product data sheet for that unique product, then you've at least got the opportunity, and you can also see where it is and the context in which it's going to be used. Then the human can apply their real intelligence to make that assessment. At the moment, the way, as I understand it, the way tech subs work, whenever that's being done, Martin, so just to qualify, the product selection bit is just, at the moment, it seems to be overwhelming for the design team to actually do that. Whereas if they had clearer information that's on product data, then it would make that job much easier.
Could do, and I think you've got like where's the diagram? Let me share a diagram quickly, George, because I think this will make it a bit easier to see as well. Actually, so this is something else I'm looking at. And back to here. So I'm trying to multitask like it's going out of fashion. If I come back up to, that's the one, that's the kiddie. Because when you think about it, part of the problem at the moment is the behaviour around it, yeah? How you behave around all the different things. Then it's about classification of all those different products, how you compare them, and how then how your builders work them in, and how you record it. And it's just literally at this stage, if they've got a better understanding of how you do that, then you're going to get to that point where it's going to be easier.
Yes.
And I think, this is why I've got to the conclusion that this bit, is going to take a bit long. What's going to happen is once you got that, you're actually going to do this initially into there and get it in the schedules. This will come later.
BWIC is builders work information.
In connection.
Yeah.
An old school term, isn't it? Builders work in connection. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So I will have another chat, George, because that's what I was talking about Richard Ashton earlier, because it'd be good to get you just involved in how this bit kind of, so you can see it properly.
Yeah.
We are a governed group, so I've got to make sure I don't share too much. So, but it's just literally a case of, you can kind of see that the natural progression, that everyone still thinks it's this, at the moment, it's doing my braining internally at digital records.
Yes.
But yeah, you can kind of see it for what it is. If that makes sense. That's
Yeah, last time I spoke to Richard was as long ago as Wednesday, Paul.
Yeah.
We share a lot of thinking, but
no, that's good. It's good. He's a good guy, Richard. Really, really nice guy.
I know. Oh yeah. John Rawls is doing the same thinking. We've got quite a few exercises ongoing about timing of design and depth of design within the organisation at the moment. And it's all, let's be honest, it's been brought about by the law changing, that there being a requirement to do this, and also because we've seen for a while now that we can't just carry on
So maybe yeah.
reinventing the wheel every time.
So coming back to my question, so the product selection is a combination, correct? I'm just replaying back what I think is the case, and tell me if it's not. The product selection is in part the performance specification that is required.
Yeah.
You've then got a prescriptive specification of what the solution to that performance specification is, and then you've got a selected product. Is that right?
Don't know. Looking at it from a structural engineer's point of view, George, you always pick something. You pick a solution, and then you do all the maths to show that it works.
Yeah. Okay.
That's if that helps in any way.
Oh
but
yeah, sure. So we're going from a performance.
You don't do the maths and the answer pops out. You pick an answer that is based on your experience normally.
Yeah.
And then you prove that it works. You do all the maths and all the calculations
Yeah,
around it.
that makes sense. That makes sense.
I bet it starts with 9.81. Yeah, Martin.
Shut up.
Sorry. So the old gravity. I always laugh with structure and you say, "So this is 9.81." I think what they obviously want to punch my head in generally when I say that, but it's just for the laugh. Yeah, you can never believe it. But you gotta you gotta laugh because with it, and I can see it with structure. You pick a solution that you want and you make sure that it works, right? I think that the hard bit is with all these other ones like ventilation. The underlying criteria is it must deliver enough air for you to breathe, and it must do it with an energy criteria that doesn't exceed like 2 watts a litre for a fan, right? That's the underlying criteria. Then you work your way back from it against all the space risks in the building to deliver it, if that makes sense. So it's the same principle. The problem is the complications of it involves multiple different space risks, where a structure is just REI, depending on where it's located. So I don't mean that rudely.
No. But you're right. You start off with a solution and then you work and see whether it stands up to the various variables that you've outlined. You make sure it works in every scenario that you can imagine. Is that right, Paul? So would you say that's applies to any engineering solution, doesn't it?
This is good because when you look at how I'm trying to deliver messages, that this kind of thing really helps. Because when you look at it, it's a good example to use, really good. Because you say, well, even with pipework, you draw the pipework system out in the building, deliver X amount of kilograms a second of whether it's cold water or hot water or domestic. Then you work your way back to ensure your pumping power is not too high, and the material is appropriate for all the circumstances for which it travels as a system. And that's the bit where it goes wrong because nobody wants to do that grunt work. That's why they CDP it, right?
Yeah.
Because even with pipe work, it's a bit. Here's the mind blower from the other day is that either side of the wall you need an 8539 fire rated fixing, fire resistant. Don't use rating, fire resistant fixing in the slab to support it. But if that pipe work goes across the top of life safety critical systems, then you've probably got to put fire resistant fixings throughout. Does that make sense? Whereas sprinklers are actually tested with fire resistant fixings and so is smoke control duct, but general pipe work's not. It gets a bit mind blowing when you look at how far you have to go down the rabbit hole for things like pipe work.
I think that's if
it's a better way of explaining it, Martin, how you've done it there. It's changed my whole brain around it. Actually, you saying that it's a good thing. This is why these groups are so powerful.
I apologise for changing your brain, Paul, but
No,
yeah,
no,
I
it's good.
find these groups really useful as well, because it does help me think through all the sort of scenarios and all that's going on at the moment.
Because when you look at it from what George you're saying, is that you're absolutely right. Is that someone designs a ventilation system to travel through a building. You then go back and now you've got your solution for how it's delivering air. Then you go back and you pick your componentry to suit the space risk within the building.
Yeah.
That's when it becomes a bit tricky. You know what I mean? Because I think with structural engineering, the one that always causes the issue is are you using reactive or non-reactive coatings? That's when it all becomes a bit
Yeah.
leery. Because that's again a summation of the space risk, what it's within and what interfaces against the steel. If it's drywall, you use an encapsulation. If it's non-drywall, you can use reactive coatings. That's when it becomes that's the trickier part of it. If that makes sense. I might be overgeneralising that might a bit, but you see what on
Yeah.
you look at it in reverse engineering. Actually, it's probably a better way for me to explain it to people. It's probably a better way of doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, we could actually do this as an exercise, Martin, for with Mace and Weig and Waits or whoever. We could actually do this as an exercise around the standardized information requirements for some fire critical items for a building, and then look at what the product solutions for those are, and then also the context. So in other words, the spaces that they are supporting, because I think that's broadly what we're saying. It's a matter of the information requirements, the context, the performance specification, the context in which that product is going to be used, and then what product is being selected. I think that's what we're saying, isn't it?
Mm.
Yeah. Deep. We've only got 5 minutes left, guys, and I do have another one at 12:30. Sorry about that. Just wanted to share something, George, that you put me onto and don't ask me when, but it was a conversation some time ago. But I found this, which you might find interesting. You might have seen it. I don't know. Do you see it now?
Yeah. You sent this to us, didn't you?
Did I?
Yeah.
Oh, am I
Yeah.
repeating myself? Apologies.
Page 11, I think.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, I've been sharing it with people.
Good. I found it. Yeah. I just found it very, very useful. That's page 11, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really good.
Yeah. There's a lot on there. There's a lot to go on there. I've started thinking about layering on fiery, 19650 government soft landings, which is now a British standard. And that thing that you referred to earlier, Paul, that safety critical features stuff that was split similarly. And then there's the mother of all documents, which came out of the Risk Authority. Have you seen that one?
What's that one there?
No.
That's the Ian Abley document.
I've got it
From the insurers.
Yeah, I've got that.
You got?
Yeah, I've got that in PDF. If you need it, I can give it to you cheekily.
No, I've got it. It's an astonishing piece of work.
Can you share it with me?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
I'll just make a note.
Do you want to send it through, Martin? You can do it.
Yeah, I'll do it.
Perfect. Because I had Ian Abbey speak for us at the Public Health Conference, and he was going through it. The A to Z essentials, isn't it?
It is, yeah. He's managed to take what is quite complicated 8 stages, and he split it into 26. Top man.
He's trying to cover it.
He has. It's a piece of work. Point I was coming back to on this very quickly is that this is some work that was done, and I think you mentioned MTC.
Yeah, MTC.
There they are with the University of Cambridge.
I've got I've got a contact for the MTC. I was doing some stuff on dampers and things with, but I'll get the contact over to you, George. Because Ian introduced it anyway. Hold on, I've got a delivery. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, no problem. Probably have to go. I will share that stuff. But we're doing some work for the MTC. Small world.
Has anybody done anything in terms of comparing the work stages, not the work stages, the gateways across the different process maps.
Yes.
We-
Yes, quite a few people have done that. They've
Yeah.
mapped it onto the Reba stages.
I've got it against the Reba stages. I wondered if it was against any of the other work stages like structure and things like that.
Okay. Probably haven't got time. We'll do it on the next one. We are trying to map out the Reba stages against the iStruct E stages, against
Yes,
the BG6 stages.
that's exactly what I'm looking for.
That's good. I'm glad you're looking for it. So am I. But someone's got
Yeah.
to do this.
Yeah.
I'm looking for a resource from somewhere within the organisation that can help me. Otherwise, I'm going to have to stop sleeping at nights in order to do this. But yeah, it's my next exercise.
Yeah, because the design group was asking for it last week.
I bet. I think we're all coming to the same. It's taken a long time, but we're all coming to the same thinking. But we did some work with CIC and CLC, Alpha BT. One of the managing directors got heavily involved in that, and they are not ready. They are not ready, and they're reporting into Deluxe.
Yeah,
and frankly, they're not ready.
Yeah.
And the fact that the regulator resigned a couple of weeks ago, before he got going, I mean, it doesn't get any weirder, does it?
Not at all. I agree. He's almost certainly gone into private practice. Yeah.
Well, he said, "Hang on, I can't do this on my own. I'm going to need some staff. I'm going to need a bigger van." What do you mean?
Sorry about that. I burnt the neighbour's mower out yesterday. It burst into flames. Basically, it was starting to smell a bit anyway. So it was on its way out. It's been there 15 years, so replacements just turned up. The old rule: they who touch it last replaces it. That's our rules.
Yes,
I've got to mow his lawn with it, by the way, because he needs some help. He's getting on a bit. He's my mate, but he's just give him some help.
Very useful, guys. We'll do it all again in a month, and I'll send you the risk authority document, George. Well worth a read.
No, it's good. Really, really good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Oh,
thank you very much.
Is anybody coming to the DCW? Are you coming to the Digital Construction Week event, Martin?
I'm not. No, because I've got a mountains.
No,
to get through. Yeah, can't make it.
Are you, Paul?
I'm planning to. I just got to check if I can squeeze off out in time to get there. That's all. I've got a meeting in the morning.
Okay. Good.
You know,
all right.
Bye. Martin, can you stay 1 second? Just 1 second.
Oh, George, why don't you go, mate? See you later, guys. Take care.
Cheers. Thanks, everyone. Bye. Bye.
Yes, sir.
I didn't see your name for the 24th visit. Is it someone actually invite you for that or no?
Which 24th visit?
We're going to Roku factory.